Hi, I'm Natalie Grace from Crystal Aura Tarot, and welcome to this week's Tarot Deep Dive. This week, our card was the Magician. He's returned. For those who follow me on Instagram, I post a weekly short video with the card of the week, and the Magician appeared maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. That time he was reversed, and the message that wanted to be conveyed at that time was all around our own creativity and the ways we were blocking creativity and, in effect, blocking our own magical skills. This time, he's upright, and so he's in a much more powerful position, heralding a realization and awareness for us all that we are magicians, that we are alchemists, and that we are here to create our own realities and to work magic and to observe magic. Now, this week, the Magician card flew out of the deck before I even was able to ask my question. Obviously, the intention of my question was already in my energy, and it was like, it's me, here I am. Flew out of the deck, and I saw him, and I was like, sometimes when things fly out of the deck, I'm like, maybe it was my shuffling and I was actually creating that. So I pulled a couple of other cards just to see if this was really the card that was wanting to be seen this week. And sure enough, it was. And it's because the two cards that I pulled afterwards really support the message of the Magician, of the power of observation in times of change and the ability to surrender to the energy of change, to be able to take the path of least resistance, the middle path of ease, of flow, instead of the polarized paths of resistance and denying the inevitable. So the first card that I actually picked was the Death card. And my personal perspective, I don't see any cards in the tarot as good or bad or as positive or negative. They each hold meaning and lessons with, positive and negative aspects, right? So the Death card, for me, it's all about renewal. It's all about the inevitability of death, of transformation, of ending and beginning. Because without death, there just can't be birth. And so much growth happens through death. The natural world depends on death to be able to replenish itself. Think of compost, for instance, stuff that's discarded, waste. It goes onto the compost pile to create new life. It's the breakdown of that plant material provides nutrients for the soil that will then feed the next generation of plants that come from seeds. So death is essential in our cycles in the material 3D world. And if we think about death as a lesson, like as a energetic or spiritual or metaphorical lesson, it is really about us facing our fears. And so the Death card really reinforced for me that this is about changing times and that nothing stays the same, and that when we resist the inevitable, it can be terribly, terribly painful. We can experience feelings of loss that cause us to feel grief. And I think as a collective, we're heading towards a new time. A lot of change is occurring right now. Death is really a lesson in letting go. So that's the first card that popped up, and I really did see this card representing the cycles of time and the cycles of change that we're currently experiencing right now. And then the other card, this is one we've seen recently, it's the Strength card. And this really spoke to the time we're in right now. Leo sun season, and Leo new moon is just around the corner. So there's obviously some beautiful Leo energy in this card. But it's also around the strength that's required and that's also gained through those big challenges that come with death, with endings, with closing of chapters. Obviously, what comes of that is the opportunity for new beginnings, but it's also the great life lessons and experiences that are gained that help teach us our own strength. And this is a very unique kind of strength. This isn't brute force. This is dignified strength. This is a strength of of patience, of perseverance, of courage. They're the characteristics that we call on to help us navigate deaths, ending cycles, or closing chapters. And so these, I feel, are reinforcements to this week's Magician card. So the first symbol that stood out to me this week for the Magician card was the symbol of eternity above his head. And really this symbolized to me that everything is constantly changing, and that is the nature of all things on earth, in this 3D incarnation that we reside in. So we have to understand that we, along with the rest of the world, are designed to be constantly evolving. I see the magician not just as a guy that can do magical tricks. He is essentially an alchemist. And alchemists learn their craft through observation of the natural world. So this is really the first lesson of the magician for this week, is that in order to evolve and understand how the world works, we must observe. We must take the time to observe. We must create the space to be able to observe those around us and our environments and just the natural world in general, and also the unnatural world. So if we want to learn about the true nature of life inside the matrix, we can learn that through observing how the matrix operates. So that's a really useful tip from the magician as well. And we get to play, once we know how it works, we get to play with the same knowledge that the architects of the matrix have to play with. The magician card is in my deck, number one. One is unity. So it's like the unity of all things, which is just the universal truth, the ultimate truth, right? Beyond source, source, if we look at source as zero, like one is everything that comes from source, right? The truth. But also if we're thinking about the numbers in regards to the Fool's Journey, which is one of the ways we can understand the story of the tarot, the symbolic story of the tarot. This is very early in the Fool's Journey. The Fool has just embarked on the journey. The Fool has carved out the time and the space just to go on this journey into the unknown. And what's the best way to become acquainted with the unknown? It's to observe. So through the courage and the inspiration to go on this journey, the Fool has evolved to a level of magician, where through the skills of observation, we start to understand the magic that exists in our world and the magic that we have at our fingertips to use to create our own reality. If we're looking at the kind of more universal symbols of this card, we can see the suits of the tarot represented in this card, which represent the elements. So we have a cup, a pentacle, a sword, and a wand on the table in front of him. Through the magician's skills of observation and devotion to observation as an alchemist, he has learned the kind of roles of the elements in the natural world and the different powers that they hold, and how we must work with those natural forces in order to create. And he ultimately is a creator. So that's a really useful thing to remember, that rather than fighting against the natural elements, the natural order, the natural inevitable change that we're constantly experiencing, working with it, being in the flow of the elements, being in the flow of the natural order, being in flow with the constant of change, is a much easier place to be when you're wanting to make magic. This magician has also mastered an understanding of the cosmic and telluric energy, so we can see by the position of the magician's hands and his wand to help him kind of attract that cosmic energy from above. As above, so below. There's energy that we can source from Gaia, from the earth. That's the telluric energy, as well as the cosmic energy, the celestial energy that resides above and around us. We are channels, we are conduits, we hold this energy. And a lot of you have probably been experiencing being immersed in energy that feels quite intense, feeling this energy, holding it in your body. And it's really important that we work with this energy, that we keep our channels open so that it can flow, so that it can move through us instead of getting stuck. Because getting stuck is when we feel out of alignment, when we feel things are very difficult, and even when we get sick. So keeping your channels open is another really important lesson from the magician in maintaining balance, but also keeping your vibration high so that you can be experiencing magic, you can be manifesting your own magic as well. Getting back to one of the core messages from Monday's Tarot for the Collective short video was really around the secret of the magician that he wanted to share with us this week. And it has a lot to do with the energy surrounding us right now. If we think about where we're headed into the age of Aquarius, whether you believe we're already in it or we're just on the precipice, kind of is irrelevant, because no matter what, when new ages are heralded in, it is a time of accelerated change, huge change, monumental change, world creating change, world's evolving change. And if we understand that that's what we're immersed in right now, that lesson of surrender is so useful. It's so useful. We can apply that in so many ways in our own lives. If we're feeling challenged by the strength or force of this energy, or the pace, this fast pace of constant change, we really have to start thinking about, well, is it difficult because it's just fast and constant and like intense, or is it also difficult because I'm fighting that? We have an understanding that we're moving through times right now, we're shifting timelines, and if we're in resistance to that inevitable fact, it's going to be a much harder process. It's going to feel much more challenging. It's going to bring more suffering, hardship. So if you're someone who has a problem with like adapting to change, surrender is a really useful mantra here, because you can really be thinking about, where am I resisting? Where am I fighting this? How can I make things easier for myself instead of harder? How can I actually work with this energy of change to go with the flow, rather than swim against the tide? It's just going to make navigating through this period a lot easier. And instead of being challenged with the harder path, you might actually find the path more enjoyable, and it will definitely help you manifest more easily. So I also added that little tip at the end of the video this week. Surrendering to what it is that you desire. Sometimes we have these desires, or we think we want something, and we're actually our own worst enemy. We get in the way of getting what we want or creating the reality that we desire. So surrender is a really important part of manifestation as well, because we want to surrender to what it is we want instead of attaching to the lack or the barrier that we have placed in front of us, which is why we don't already have that thing yet. We want to really kind of unpack what it is to surrender to our own desires, to our own visions, to our own dreams of the reality we wish to reside in. So they're the lessons from the magician this week. Practice your skills of observation and use the knowledge that you gain from observing the natural order, the way things work, even the matrix, to help you surrender. And when I say surrender, I don't mean be weak or be small. I'm really talking about letting go of resistance. It's the opposite of resistance. So making these energies work for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to Crystal Aura Tarot, this channel on YouTube. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Crystal Aura Tarot. And there I do regular live streams and weekly tarot forecasts. I also offer online tarot readings one-on-one. So if you'd like to book a reading with me, head on over to crystalauratarot.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.